Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we continue our lessons from the Golden Monk series. Today's topic is Become an Ambassador of Goodwill, with a speaker, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have close to 15 members on Zoom, and I have got Shweta helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you very much, Jay. Great to see you. Hi, Tim and Vicky. How are you? Good to see you. Radha great to see you. Angie, Luba, Poonam, Shweka is always there in the background making things work. We've got Wolf. Hey, Wolf. Pradeep is here. Debbie, Carrie, Raj, SG, and more coming in the door. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here today. We're following the teachings of the Golden Monk, and it's something that I studied quite a bit in my younger years. When I joined an ashram in my teens, I spent a good amount of time in India every year, about 3 months. And one of the practices I had each year, around the beginning of the year, starting at January, February, going through March, was to follow the path that the Golden Monk took when he went throughout South India to give his teachings. He actually went just with one other assistant. Back then it was a lot more difficult, or maybe not. I mean, it was by foot and bullock cart and things like that. Even when I was going to India in the 1970s, a lot was by bullock cart, what to speak of 500 plus years ago. So he went by foot, but one of my predecessor teachers, the teacher of my teacher in the tradition of yoga that I come from, had put up a monument in all the places that he had visited around South India. And it's also recorded the places. It was not so easy to get to so many places, but I tried year after year for several years to go to those places. And while I was there, I read a lot of the teachings of the Golden Monk. What I'm trying to do is essentialize them. They're given in great detail in a very large book called the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And there's a summary of it also elsewhere. But I'm taking some of the essential teachings, hopefully ones that are philosophically useful to us, and also some of the practices that we can adopt. Because, and just recently, I just got back, as did some others that I see on this call, from a retreat that took place in Utah. Before I went to the retreat, I have a good friend who's a fellow practitioner of yoga. He's quite a bit younger than I am, but he's sort of a child prodigy scholar. I think he got his PhD when he was 17. And he was homeschooled, as you might expect, and comes from a very exalted family. Anyway, I keep in touch with him. He comes and visits one of the centers that we manage here and lectures every year in a very in-depth way, because he's a scholar. He speaks Spanish. He speaks Sanskrit quite fluently. And so my wife and I went and spent 3 days with he and his family. He has 2 kids. He teaches at Utah State. He's the head of the religious studies program there. And while we were talking, there's a concept that came up that I found to be very useful. Does anybody want to hear anything useful? Or should I just speak gibberish today, like usual? So one of the concepts he gave, which was from a tradition called the Sri Sampradaya, is that there are 2 concepts in a philosophical system that are important when considering the goal of yoga, which is to connect to the Supreme. He said one is the the very lofty conception, or if you will, the majesty of the idea of embracing or just even conceiving of that which is absolute and supreme. And the other is accessibility. So in Sanskrit, one of them is called saulabhya, which means, is it easily attainable, or is there any access whatsoever? And the other one is called paratva, which means the greatness of it. And so if something's very, very great, and the destination is very great, but we don't have access to it, then it doesn't matter to us because there's no way we can connect. So that's not helpful. In fact, he said that philosophers often consider, when they're measuring different kinds of philosophies, which one has the most saulabhya, or which one has the most access. And if we can't access it, then there's no point in it at all. On the other side, if it's just freely accessible, but there's no greatness to it, then like just going to, this may not be right now the best example, but a gas station to get petrol. Anybody can do it anywhere at any time. It's just fully accessible. But there's no big deal about it because anybody can do it, and it's not that great. So both aspects have to be there. So the golden monk knew this very well, of course, and taught both sides. Like, what is it that we're trying to do in a philosophical system? One of the aspects is to find our dharma, or our lifestyle, which is completely lined with our highest purpose, our dharma, our highest purpose. And also, how would we access, how would we have a connection to our higher self, as distinguished from, as oftentimes I do here, our lower self, which is the body, the mind. And then, of course, we have the essence of who we are, the spiritual essence. Some people say the soul, or the Atma in Sanskrit. And then there's the Paramatma, or as the indigenous people of America used to say, the super spirit, that all-pervading power. Where does it come from, and how do we have a connection to it? And so the Golden Monk was teaching practical ways that anyone living in a simple surrounding, even in with an occupation, family life, you can have access to that. So that's important. So it's one of the attractive features of the Golden Monk's teachings is that he gives both sides. What is it that we're after, and how to be connected there on a regular basis? It's not something ethereal, pie in the sky. It's water in the palm of our hand, something we can drink right now. And it's not like if somebody tells you, I'm thirsty, and you say, yeah, there's water in the clouds, help yourself. Or there's water in the ground, just dig a hole, you can get it. We want water in the palm of our hands. So that's the practicality of the Golden Monk's teachings, to show us how to have that. And I'll touch on that today. Before I go into a few other points, what to speak of our beginning meditation, can anybody think of any points so far from the teachings of the Golden Monk? We're on teaching number 11. That means we've taken 11 up to now, 10 sessions. Today's 11, to talk about various aspects of his teachings. Does anybody have any notes in front of them, or etched in their brain that you remember any of the points? Don't worry if you don't, because I can't remember any of them either. I have no idea. And if you want to respond, you can be really brave and put a message in the chat box. And if you want to be really, really brave, you can speak up on the Zoom, in the Zoom room.
MH Vyas says karma.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Vyas. Vyas means the editor. So, yes, one of the aspects we talked a lot about is karma. Karma really means work, but what kind of work? What's motivating our work, and what are the implications of work? And that's a lot of what's talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, and the Golden Monk talked about. Nicole said we're wandering the universe since many lives. Exactly. That's one of the points. And the Golden Monk spoke in Bengali, so he said, Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. My attempt at Bengali. So what he said is, everybody, all the atmas in this world, that's us. By the way, raise your hand if you're an atma. Yeah, atmas. So all the atmas here are wandering. How is it we're wandering? We just go from one place to another. We don't know how we came into this particular body. You just wake up again, deja vu, in some kind of surrounding, people peering down at you, maybe a nursemaid, and then you've got doctor perhaps, or just your parents or your mom, and you're in a new place. And we get moved around from one place to the next because of the law of karma. In this way, we meander, we wander. And so the Golden Monk said, this is actually what's happening to us. Let's see. Kalyan said, your sadhana is your strength, your austerities are your riches. Yeah, I like those too. Very helpful. This morning, because I was on the road for a few days, really busy schedule. Of course, we did have some early morning practices on the retreat. It was very nice. And since I got home, like this morning, there was a lot happening, but I was able to get in my morning practice, and I felt so good about it. I felt that, wow, I've done that. I got the base for my day, and I did feel strength from it. And austerities are riches. Austerities in the sense of, am I able to control my senses? Like delayed gratification. There's always a fruit at the end when you delay gratification for the right cause. And if you do that and you take the higher ground, your stomach, your tongue, your eyes, whatever it is, may protest and say, hey, wait a minute. And say, no, you wait a minute and just see. You might get something back that you like better. And that's so if we're able to develop that, and we're able to actually practice delaying gratification. In fact, one of the verses in the Bhagavad Gita describes the Suki Nara. Anybody here speak Japanese? Nihongo ga wa karimasu ka? Well, if you don't, that's good, because that's a Sanskrit word, Suki Nara, but to me it sounds Japanese. And I speak a little. But Suki means happy and Nara means a human. So what's a Suki Nara, a happy human? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes Shaknoti Haivaya Shodhum Praksharira Vimokshanat. So he said, before you exit this present body that you have, if you're able to control your senses, he said, then you become a Sukhi Nara. Anybody want to be a Sukhi Nara? I do. A real happy human. It doesn't come from the emolument of the senses, but it comes from sense control. And that's not just what Bhakti Yoga or the Golden Monk taught, because just the militant control of the senses does not bring happiness. But replacing ordinary base sense gratification with spiritual sense gratification. There is such a thing, because we have senses, we have to use them. So the Golden Monk did teach about that. There's a higher form of sense gratification. It's beyond just the friction that we get between our senses and sense objects here in this material world that gives some temporary stimulation. It's a happiness that actually we experience within. Okay, Mayank said, yes, please go ahead, JM.
No, I was saying the same
I'm on a roll. You got to slow me down here.
Which is good. Mayank said that living entities are marginal energy of the Supreme.
That's right. Tatasta. And I've translated that in my own language as open to suggestion. You may notice this. People flip-flop on things all the time. Maybe you've even flip-flopped on something. Someone said, hey, wait a minute, I thought you believed in this. And you say, no, now I believe in that. This, that, this, that, this, that. That means, tatasta means we're not here or there. We can roam, we can wander. And we need something to tie us down. That's yoga. Yoga means to tie something down, to connect. And so otherwise, we're unmoored. You let the helium balloon go, it just flies off. So tatasta, we're marginal energy. So we also have consciousness, which means free will, which is the biggest topic of the century, of the universe, the biggest topic ever that we could get into. What is free will? Well, we're conscious entities. We get to decide where we place our attention. And there's a difference. There's a difference. There are higher and lower energies in the universe. It's not all the same, according to the Golden Monk's teachings. He said, if you concentrate on the lower energies, your consciousness is going to become low. And if you concentrate on higher energies, meaning spiritual energy, mostly through sound vibration, then your consciousness is going to improve. It's going to become refined. And that's what the source of happiness is, clean consciousness. And then
Rajesh said having has nothing to do with being.
that's true. So we've talked about that before. Whatever we think we have here is on loan. And it actually, when I think I have something and I claim mamaka, it's mine, then it changes from being a thing to my thing. And what's the difference between a thing and my thing? My thing becomes a part of me. And of course, when I attach myself to the things of this world that are ephemeral, they're just passing through, that's where misery comes from. Because I want them to be permanent like I am. My body's not permanent. That's another thing, actually. My thoughts actually aren't even permanent. They're passing through like clouds. I'm the observer of all of them. But if I claim ownership, that's when I become burdened by the things, because they're no longer just things, they're my things. Now there's an antidote to that, which is not to give up things. It's not to give up things. Newsflash. They're not ours to give up. So if I walk into the Bank of America, or if you prefer another bank, please let me know, and I'll give a spot for them. You walk in the Bank of America and say, I renounce this bank. Everyone will look at you like, what do you mean? You don't own the bank. But if I go in and I say, give me all the money, it's mine, then you're going to jail. What's the third option? Well, as we described before, we consider things in their right context. Everything that's available to me in the world, and some things are available, some things aren't, is paraphernalia to be used in service. So if I take my quota and I use it in service, then I never become actually attached to things like a bank teller. Bank teller doesn't take the money and put it in his or her pocket, because the minute you take $1 off the stack and say it's just $1, you're out. Sir, madam, you're out. But if you count it dutifully, it comes in, it goes out, you don't touch it, you just do your duty, then you're a good bank teller. Same thing. When we move about the world, we don't consider this is mine. We consider, how is this to be used in the proper way? As an ambassador of goodwill, I extend all things in service. That's the teaching of the Golden Monk. And finally, we have two more. Please go ahead.
MH says mindfulness with japa, which I think we'll do shortly. And Wolf has a question, which is our soul here in its entirety, or part of it resides at home, or the other side?
Wolf, you always ask the most esoteric questions. What would we do without you? Well, just to keep it simple, we are the soul. It's not that we have a soul. So wherever we go, there we are. And it's a matter of our orientation. So let's say go to an idyllic place. And somebody name an idyllic place on this planet. Are there any left? Utah was pretty nice. We were just there. I hadn't been there since I was a kid, I think. That was many moons ago. So let's say you're in an idyllic place. No suggestions?
Not yet. You can type in or unmute and share. Hawaii, Mansi says.
There were too many. Um,
Now we have four in Kalyan says Alaska. Christian says,
Alaska, I heard, is pretty good. My friend Radhika was telling me about Alaska. He went there and said, "You can't believe it; it's unbelievable." So let's say you're in an idyllic place. Say Alaska. God, there's some good places. I think we're gonna look at them. So then you might be in one place that's seemingly idyllic, but your mind is somewhere else. Your mind is in a disturbed state, so you're not actually there. You're somewhere else, or you may be in a very disturbing place, and still your mind becomes from within. Your orientation is in a much higher place. Then you're not actually there. So wherever our mind goes, we go with it. And there is a case for dual citizenship, Wolf, but it's a really kind of deep topic. I think we'll get into that. Gradually. Okay, so onward and upward. Let's do a little meditation since Vyas brought up meditation. He said mindfulness with japa. I highly recommend this. It's a practice that was given to me by my teacher, and I've maintained it over 50 years. And it requires taking a little time for yourself. What a concept. We give it to so many other people. But it's called swadhyaya, self-study. Why not look at oneself for a change instead of looking at everyone else's lives? There's billions of YouTube presentations, everyone talking about what they do. Take a look and see what you do, how you move, how your mind's moving, and so forth. And one of the ways to do that is japa. So japa is a practice called mantra meditation, where you take a mantra and then you repeat the words in it and listen to it. And as the repetition goes on, you'll find that your mind goes elsewhere, your body goes out of alignment, but you just keep bringing it back gently, gently, gently. And after a while, you get in resonance with the mantra. The idea behind mantra, man means mind and tra means to lift. So you're lifted above the maelstrom of the mind. It's like a little hurricane going on all the time, in case you haven't noticed. And you do notice when you start doing meditations, wow, I didn't know there was a hurricane in my mind. Did you all know that? A little hurricane going on there? So you can rise above the storm, or at least go into the eye of the storm through japa. So let's try it. We can sit up a little straighter than we were a moment ago. When I was at the retreat, I was sitting next to an old friend of mine in the morning practicing japa in a very beautiful place in Utah. And I just noticed he always keeps correcting his posture and sitting up straighter. And whenever I did that, then I felt I came to attention. Little trick of the yogis. So next you can try closing your eyes, or why don't you put up on the screen our first mantra, Nitai Gauranga, and we'll practice, just see what it's like to repeat that mantra. And Nitai Gauranga, 5 syllables. And this is one of the mantras that is recommended in some of the ancient wisdom literatures. Opens the heart chakra and allows us to experience unlimited compassion. And so I'll say this mantra 10 times so you don't have to count, and you can just listen to the sound vibration as you say it behind muted mics, and don't judge it, don't try to interpret it, just listen to the sound, and if, at the very least, just try to bring your mind back to it. So Nitai means that which is eternal. It never stops. We can relate to that because as the essence of consciousness within the body, we never stop. We never die. Nitai. And Gauranga. Gauranga is an avatar who brought the light of compassion. And who is said to be Vishwambar, resides within the heart region. So we say Nitai Gauranga. It opens us to this eternality and to the feeling of compassion in the heart. So I'll say 10 times, and I'm counting. For those of you who want to know, on my fingers, there's 10 little pads that you can count on. So let's try. Nitai Gauranga. 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 And now I'm going to make a sound on my new harmonium, and we'll chant the one syllable mantra, Om. I'll do it 3 times. You can follow along if you like. And just take a moment to notice the penetration of the vibration. And rub your hands together, open your eyes, and come back into the Zoom room. So these mantras, they have otherworldly potencies, and you can utilize this for your meditation. Enter into a state of higher consciousness. And this is one of the main teachings of the Golden Monk, as we'll see. So let's go through a few slides. Now, today's topic is one of the main advocacies of the Golden Monk, and he said, try to become an ambassador of goodwill. So what's the word ambassador? Yeah, late Middle English from French, ambassadeur from Italian, ambasciator, based on Latin, ambicus, servant, like a servant representing goodwill, bringing it to other people. So this is called parupakar. The Golden Monk said, parupakar, try to think about how to do good for others. It's the best occupation, good work if you can do it, if you can get it. Do good for others. This is the meaning of parupakar. So he said, wherever you go, help others by giving transcendental knowledge. This was the essence of his teaching about how to do good for others, because there's a way in which the knowledge, especially transcendental knowledge, which means knowledge of the difference between ourselves and our bodies. There's a gulf of difference between the way we will orient ourselves rather, in our activities based on that knowledge. Interestingly, knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita is called Jnana Agni. So there's a metaphor for knowledge. It's like fire. Agni means fire. So Jnana means knowledge. And by the way, it's cognate with the word knowledge in English. It looks like a funny word. It's spelled K-N-O-W, to know something. And it comes from Sanskrit, Gyan, which is spelled with J-N-A-N-A, Jnana. It's pronounced Jnana, and knowledge. So it's descended, that has the English word know, from the word Gyan. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes transcendental knowledge as all satisfying. It's actually what satisfies us. And then he also calls it Jnana Agni. So it's the fire of knowledge through which we can burn up all our bad habits and actually all our karma, which means the ways that we're impelled by the impressions in our mind to make choices beyond our free will. In other words, like an addiction means we followed a pathway in our brain so many times, even though we knew it was wrong, that even though we can understand this is bad for me, I still do it because I feel I'm forced to do it. Anybody? Anyone had this experience? Thank you. So there's a way in which we're constantly being entangled in these pathways. This is karma. We're forced to go in a certain way, impelled, pushed. So by Jnana Agni, this is the fire that burns up those ropes that pull us in various directions beyond our will. And we actually can express more and more of our free will. And that means it starts with understanding what's actually good for me. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes that when one starts the process of yoga, one starts to discern, yes, there actually are higher goals in life besides just giving into the senses in the various ways that they're attracted to sense objects. But he said in the beginning, it requires a little willpower and force. But he said there's a time when one gets a higher taste. The verse says, Vishaya vinivartate nirahara sedehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishva nivartate. So param means higher and drishva means to see. When you see something better, then you naturally give up the lower things. So this is the beginning, is this kind of knowledge through which we get attracted to understanding more about our higher self. So the Golden Monk, in essence, said, try to get this occupation as much as possible. Be like a physician who gives out useful knowledge, not in a condescending way, but best to teach by example. Teach by example, show a good example of a lifestyle. And whenever possible, share aspects of the practice that other people can take up. This is good for them, good for you, he said. So then he taught about the 5 causes of suffering. So why do I bring this up? I brought up Jnana Agni, the fire of knowledge, and what are the root causes for suffering. And of course, this is nothing new. It's not from 500 years ago. It's from thousands of years ago. You'll find it in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. You'll find it in Bhagavad Gita, which is known to be over 5,000 years old. And the ancient Vedas, which are said to be millions of years old, they talk about the ways in which I become ensnared by the material energy. And there are 5 aspects that cause suffering. So the first is called avidya. Vidya means knowledge, and in Sanskrit, when you put an A in front of it, it changes the meaning, it makes it opposite. So avidya means ignorance. And the essence of that means to mistake the impermanent to be permanent. Can anybody think of an example where you think of something as permanent when it's actually impermanent? Or you relate to it as if it's going to be there forever, but actually it's not. For 250 points. The body. Okay. All right. So someone said the body. Nirali, can you support your position, please? Give an oral defense of your position.
Yeah, it's it's in front of us. We grew up as we were born first, and the body changes. We still don't understand. We are gonna leave the body one day. We keep going to the old age, and we still hang on to the body, and keep pleasing it with either food or whatever it requires, right? And that's, I feel, hard to, we know it, but still we have that false ego, right? It's mine.
Wow. Nice points, Nirali. Thank you very much. In detail also. But one of the very interesting metaphors given in the ancient wisdom literatures, it's there in some of the teachings of the Buddha. It's also there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And ancient philosophers like Seneca from the Stoics talked about how the body is like a river. And a river, although we call it one thing, the Mississippi, Missippi, I forget. So Mississippi River, one thing. No, it's not. Never is. It's never been the same river. It's always different. So if you think about the body, okay, so their challenge is you can never step in the same river twice. So we can't breathe in the same body twice. If you look at it on a microbiological level, the body is a river. Frankly, it's a river. Just notice that you have veins. It's constantly moving. It's in flux constantly. It is never the same body. From the time that the body is conceived to the time we come out of the womb to the time it's growing, it's always changing. It's never the same. So I can never breathe in the same body twice. However, I accept this is me. I came out of the womb in Walnut Creek, California in 1956. There were people waiting for me there. I didn't have a name for a little while, and then they slapped a name tag on me and said, "Your name is William Suchek. Here you go." And that was it. But that's not, I can't keep that moniker. It'll disappear. Even Ozymandias, Shelley wrote that poem about Ozymandias, the great emperor in the desert. Only the big stone statue of him that's broken at the legs, only his legs are standing up. The rest of it is worn away by the blasting sands. And he says that I'm the king of kings. Look at me and despair, he says, but gone, worn away by the time. So absolutely, the body is something that I identify with all the time. I'm constantly looking at it and thinking, oh, how do I look? Well, I mean, that's reasonable on one level. You want to be presentable, right? But at the same time, I'm not my hair. I'm not my skin. Ultimately, if you break it all down into pieces, as you said, there's a sense of false ego or false identification. So one of the first aspects of knowledge, which is vidya, not avidya, which is ignorance, is to know the difference between myself as the witness of the body and the body, which is really a biomechanical robot. It's something we can look at and marvel at. It's definitely inconceivably complex, and it's a wonderful machine, but it's not us. Nice one. 250 points lit up on the screen for Nirali. Thank you very much. Okay, let's look at the next aspect of the Golden Monk's teachings, which he's bringing forth from these ancient wisdom literatures. And the next aspect is something that Nirali already mentioned, which is asmita, which means false ego, I, me, mine. I mistake the impermanent to be the permanent, is avidya, ignorance, and then I claim it that it's mine. So what is there that we have, that anybody has right now, that you get to keep permanently? Any of the things that you have, any of the relationships you have, which one and don't get all esoteric. Just tell me, like on a like basic material level, what thing do you have right now? Kind of a trick question for 250 points. What do you get to keep?
It's not material, but it's memories and things that we share that we can look back on and hold in our heart, in our soul. And our soul is what we keep with us. What we are.
Yeah, that's a good point. On one level, we have our memories. Only the golden monk would maybe bring it to another context. There's a lot of discussion, and we've talked about it in previous classes from the Yoga Sutras. And I'm just presenting from the context of these ancient teachings. So the way they describe memories that we have not just from this life, but also from previous lives is like a cloud, a digital cloud. The experiences we have in this world through not just this body, but previous bodies, much like if you had a previous cell phone. Does everyone have the same cell phone you had when you first started using a cell phone? No? You got a new one? Yeah. Okay, so you get a new one, but you still have the same apps probably, or many of them, and a lot of the same information that's still in there gets transferred from one hard piece of hardware to another. The software is there. So the Yoga Sutra compares the body, the physical body, gross physical body, to be the hardware. And then the mind, it's called the chitta. That's also part of the material universe, and it's different from us. So we have a chitta, a mind. It goes with us as much as the software goes with you from one cell phone to the next, from one physical body, that's our hardware right here, to the next. And we keep those memories. However, as mentioned, mukta hitva yatarupam swarupena vyavastiti. This is one of the admonitions in Sanskrit about what liberation means. You rise above both the physical, gross, and subtle body. We have a different life that's transcendental even to the mind and to previous memories. So although I totally agree that we keep these memories, we bring them with us, we have them stored in there, and that becomes a sense of our identity. At the same time, there's a departure from those at a certain point, because the mind also is part of the material world. So it's constantly changing. Now, after I said all that, does anybody want to give one more? Or should I move to the next?
Did you by chance read what I wrote in the chat?
I'm going to look at it right now.
It's the imprint we leave behind, our legacy.
Yes. Knowledge and kindness given to others. Yes.
Knowledge and kindness that we share with others.
Yeah, definitely. Only I guess from the perspective of, the samsara, I'm in one life, I move to the next. And it is true. I like your point about the way that we leave a legacy behind us. And for those who are ambassadors of Goodwill, particularly, they're thought of for generations to come. So yeah, I like that. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to number 3. So the golden monk. Raga means attachment. So the desire for happiness based on material acquisition. Many of these are interlaced. So raga means that I become overheated, and my sense of self and my sense of happiness is on acquisition. So whatever we acquire, obviously, has a beginning and an end, at a shelf life. So there's already a cognitive dissonance ingrained or inherent in my acquisition because I can't keep it. And dvesha is something I mentioned, like an aversion to the material world. The golden monk taught we shouldn't be attached to it, nor should we be averse to it. It's actually a part of our original source, all the energies here. So either an extreme attachment or extreme hatred for the world, both these things are causes of suffering. And then finally, abhinibheshita, which is an interesting word. It means to be fully absorbed in something or to cling. So especially clinging to the material body, and especially thinking and or being fearful that death is the end. So these are 5 ways in which we suffer within the mind. And the Golden Monk talked about the way Jnana Agni and the practice of Bhakti Yoga helps to adjust all these so that we rise above suffering. So what are the words? The word in Sanskrit, it's a beautiful word. Chikitsitam means the cure, panacea, medicine. And the Golden Monk taught that sound is the subtle element that can actually repair us from the inside out. Sound is the subtle element that can repair us from inside out. Like when your computer's broken, let's say it's normally a software problem and it needs to be adjusted. So we also may have a software problem, as mentioned above, with the 5 different anomalies of mind. And so chikitsutam means the cure. And then one other concept, which the Golden Monk called Shravanadi Jal. So Jal in Bengali is water, just as agua purificada in Espanol, and then we have mizu in Japanese. Any others? In Cantonese, sui. Any other expressions of water from different languages? Pani. Hindi is pani.
Rebecca says liu, I think, or you in French.
Rebecca, let's hear you say it. We need a little French on here. Oh, we got Tamil. Tamil is
Tanir.
Tanir.
Apa in Sanskrit, Kalyan says.
Appa. Okay, we have a Sanskritist on here today. Agua in Portuguese. All right, so different languages. So we can all relate to water. I know I can. I have a glass of water right here. And nothing can replace nice, pure, cool water. So jal, it's a nice word. So next time you go somewhere and so can I give you anything? Just give me a cup of jal. What is that? It's water. But what's special about this phrase is Shravanadi Jal. So the Golden Monk was very poetical, and he surrounded himself by poets also, some of the greatest in the world, actually. Some of his students, a head-spinning poetry and dramas and plays that they wrote. In fact, Bengal, where the place where he taught much of the time, was a seat of learning at that time, and especially for literature. So, Shravanadi Jal, let me explain the word. Let's look at it really briefly. So, Shravana means to hear. It means to hear. So I said sound is a subtle element that can repair us from the inside. So he recommended this Shravana. That's the second line down, Shravana. And then there's another part. It's a dual word, Shravan Adi. It should be a long A, but I can't put the Sanskrit diacritics in it. So Shravan Adi. Adi means and etc. 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 So Shravan Adi. So beginning in the process of bhakti is hearing, like hearing the mantra. And so Jal, Shravanadi Jal means that you're actually watering the seed of bhakti in your heart. In your heart. And so when you water that seed by Shravana, by hearing transcendental sound, then it starts to grow. Now, what happens when it grows? See these little sprouts? They have 2 leaves. That's typical of a sprout. So poetically, the Golden Monk then described, I think it's in the next slide, what these 2 leaves are. What do you get from Shravanadi Jal? First is called, sorry for all the Sanskrit today, but it's kind of fun. At least I'm having a blast. Keshagni. Keshagni means relief from material distress. That's one of the leaves. So imagine the creeper, it's coming up with these 2 leaves. So one of the leaves is Kleshagni. And that means you start to actually feel relief from material distress when you water the seed and it pops up. And the other one is called subhada, which means the awakening of auspiciousness. Interesting word, auspiciousness. It means everything lines up properly in your life. And so the Golden Monk described how the process of spiritual advancement starts with Shravanadi Jal, and he advocated, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, that you give people an opportunity, first yourself, and then others an opportunity to take this chikitsitam, or kind of remedial measure that helps one improve from the inside out. Okay, let's take some reflections or questions. I really loaded on a lot today because the Golden Monk taught a lot and there's a lot to say. But let's see if there anything, a reflection, anything that stuck, anything, did you underline anything in your notes or in your mind that you said, oh, yeah, that word or concept is something that could be helpful sometime in the future? What was it?
Kerry said, this is enjoyable.
Well, you just made my whole day, Carrie. Thank you.
And Wolf was requesting a refresh on the identity of the Golden Monk, please.
Refresh on the identity of the Golden Monk. Yeah, Golden Monk was called Chaitanya. And Chaitanya appeared like in the 1400s in Bengal. And he started in a place called Navadvip. When he was a child, he was a prodigy scholar. In fact, he kind of started his own college by the time he was about 12, because he was such a great scholar, and students wanted to come learn from him from all over the country. And in fact, it's mentioned in the history that there was this debate that took place, because that was one of the sports at the time. Like nowadays we have NBA, NFL, who knows what else, and people would come. Back then they were really into debates, philosophical debates, and they would challenge each other and their knowledge of language and history and philosophy and the logic and so forth. So there was a great scholar at that time. He was called Keshava Kashmiri. And back then, when you defeated somebody, then you'd have a little card they'd sign. And he had a long list of people he had defeated everywhere. So whenever he'd travel around, he had quite an entourage. They had elephants. That was a big thing back then. I mean, nowadays it's hard to maintain a puppy dog, but try maintaining an elephant. So actually, he traveled around with an elephant and entourage of people who were his admirers, and he would line up these debates, public debates, and then he'd win and he'd move on to the next place. So when it was known that he was coming to the town of Chaitanya, who was just a young boy at the time, most of the elderly scholars who were actually pretty famous there in Navadvip, they left town on some pretense. My mom's calling me. She needs a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I got to go. So they left. However, at the time, the Golden Monk was his nickname when he was a child was Nimai. So he just stayed there with all the students. And when this big scholar came to town, there was a serendipitous meeting, and they had this debate. So you want me to tell you about the debate? It's actually listed in the history. All right, I'll give a brief summary of it. So what happened was the Nimai, he asked this scholar, he said, please compose some verses in Sanskrit on the spot. This is how good they were, these scholars. Compose them on the spot, like right out of your mind. Compose some Sanskrit verses. Sanskrit verses have very precise. There's rules. It's like computer language. You can't just jam things in. It has to work metrically and grammatically. So he said, say something about the Ganges, because they were sitting right there next to the Ganges. So it's known to be like a sacred river. So he said, say something to appreciate the Ganges. So the scholar composed 100 verses off the top of his head and just spoke them. And then Nimai said, wow, that was amazing. How did you do that? And he said, that's how I roll. I'm the greatest scholar in the world. And then Nimai said, okay. And imagine this is just a kid talking to like this great scholar. So he said, now let's look at the merits and demerits of your composition. And this great scholar said, what do you mean demerits? There are no demerits in any of my work. And so Nimai then recited one of the verses. He just picked it out because remember, the scholar just spoke them into thin air. And Nimai remembered one of the verses. And he just said it. And then the scholar was amazed. He said, how could you do that? And he said, it's just a trait I was born with. I have a photographic memory. I hear something, I remember it. It's called Shrutidar. Everything I hear, I remember. And so already the scholar was starting to become a little worried, like, who is this person? So then Nimai deconstructed the verse and said, here's where the mistakes are. There was a mistake of redundancy. He had used a word that wasn't proper in Sanskrit because it said the same thing twice. Obviously, that's redundancy, like I'm doing right now. And so, he grammatically just pulled it apart. And so now remember, Nimai had all these students. So they started to laugh at the scholar, and Nimai stopped him. He said, no, don't laugh. This is not a time to laugh. So the scholar went home, not home, but nearby in his camp for that night. He couldn't sleep. And the next day he came back and he submitted himself as a student of Nimai, even though he was this elderly scholar, and Nimai is like 12 years old at the time. And so that's a story in the history books about the meeting of Nimai and what he was called the Digvijay Pandit, the person who conquered all directions. But when he came to Navadvip, that was it. So he did the Golden Monk as a great scholar. And actually he was very condescending. People used to avoid him. They'd cross the street so they wouldn't have to talk to him because he was very haughty in that way. Later, he totally changed. He became humble. He took the renounced order of life. He became a monk when he was 24. And then that's when he spent the rest of his years trying to do good for others. That's the, thumbnail sketch of the Golden Monk, his origins. He ended up moving to a place that I'm planning to go soon, taking a little retreat there many of you have probably seen it. There have been movies about it. It's a place called Puri. It's right on the coast. That's where he lived, did the Golden Monk for about more than a decade, and spent a lot of time giving his teachings right from that place. Wow, did I burn up a lot of clock? JM, what to do? Is there one more comment or reflection just to balance things out a little bit?
Yeah, and there are a couple of them. One is Rebecca said, and Subhadra also concurred that sound is the subtle element that can repair us from the inside out.
Right. Are there any more slides, or did I bring us to the very end?
That was the end.
Okay, so let's leave on that comment because I promised something practical, and that's something I began with. The mantra meditation is something that the Golden Monk taught, is available to everyone because standard equipment, when you get a human body, free pair of ears and a tongue, comes in standard equipment, just like the free undercoating they give you when you buy a new car. It's actually kind of amazing the power we have to hear and to use the tongue. So the Golden Monk said, that's all the paraphernalia you need to become enlightened. And if you use your own tongue and these little ears to catch the sound, you can enlighten yourself. So he recommended taking up the practice of mantra meditation. The mantra is like a little sound package. It comes, as the theory goes, from a higher realm. When you repeat the mantra, you listen to it, then you essentially enter into a different realm. And I can attest to this. It's a standard practice. I've been doing it every day for many years. And it is the most self-aligning process that one can take to. And I highly recommend it, taking some time to chant the mantra each day. There are ways of doing it where you can stay steady in the practice. For instance, counting the number of mantras that you do every day. And so to do that, you can either use your fingers to count, which is kind of hard, but then you can also, depends how many mantras you do. You can also get a little electronic clicker. It's not exactly electronic, it just has a little button in it, a little battery in it. You see people use those kind of counters for counting how many people walk into a stadium or something. Those are nice to carry in your hand because you can sit down, you can count how many mantras you do. And then there's a traditional way of using beads. You'll find that all over Asia and also Europe as well. People use beads to count various kinds of prayers and mantras. So if you count your mantras every day and you stick to a certain number, you'll notice that you will gain a fruit, which is insight into where happiness comes from. You'll be able to feel more compassionate towards others. And those are rare qualities, not easily gotten in this world. That's the teachings of the Golden Monk for today. I'm deeply touched that you all came here and paid such close attention for so long. I hardly know how I would begin to express my gratitude. Thank you, everybody. You know, there are yogis that sit in the highland, that is the Himalayas, the tip of India. Sometimes when you fly into India on a clear day, you can see them. There's yogis that sit in those caves and they come out from time to time to get some fruits and roots. And when they see one another on the high peaks of the Himalayas, they get excited to encourage one another. And they have this phrase, Haribol, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. And the way they do it is they raise their hands high in the air like this and they say, Haribol.
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 Haribol!
Thanks, everybody. See you next time, whenever that may be.
I look
Thank you.
forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.